Hey everyone, welcome back. Quick disclaimer, these stories are for entertainment and are meant to give you chills while keeping it safe and fun. Now, I'm trying out a new voice. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if it's working, and while you're there, tell me where you're watching from. Alright, grab your headphones, turn down the lights, and let's get into today's creepy tale. I stayed in a secret McDonald's location listed on the dark web. The kitchen never closes, and the employees never blink. Alright, so I'm not the kind of guy who goes looking for trouble, okay? I'm just a regular dude who spends too much time online, watches way too many creepy YouTube videos, and sometimes stays up until 3 a.m. falling down weird internet rabbit holes. You know the vibe. A couple of weeks ago, I was scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled across a thread about secret restaurants. You've probably seen stuff like it before, people claiming there are hidden Starbucks locations where you can only order off-menu drinks or secret Taco Bell kitchens where they test new recipes. Most of it was just clickbait nonsense, but one comment caught my eye. It said something like, if you're into secret restaurants, check out the deep web. There's a McDonald's location that isn't on the map, and the food isn't on the menu. Trust me, it's worth it. Now, I've messed around with the deep web before, mostly out of curiosity. I'm not doing anything illegal, just poking around. So I figured, why not? Worst case, I'd find nothing, and best case, I'd have a cool story to tell my friends. After about an hour of clicking through shady links and forums, I found it. The page didn't have a name, just a black background with a single line of text. Welcome to McDonald's number 19. Below it was an address, GPS coordinates, and a note that said, Open 24/7, ask for the manager's special. I'll admit I was intrigued. The coordinates were about 2 hours from my city, out in the middle of nowhere. A McDonald's in the boonies wasn't that weird, but something about the whole setup felt off. Still, my curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my car keys and decided to check it out. The drive out there was uneventful, but as I got closer, the area started to feel more isolated. The GPS took me down a long, empty highway with no streetlights, and then onto a gravel road that seemed to go on forever. I started to wonder if this was a bad idea. My phone's signal was cutting in and out, and the darkness outside felt too quiet, like the world had forgotten this place existed. Finally, I saw it. At the end of the road was a small McDonald's, glowing like a beacon in the middle of nowhere. It looked like any other McDonald's you'd see in a suburb. Bright red and yellow lights, a drive-through, and a big golden arches sign out front. But there were no cars in the parking lot. No people inside, just silence. I parked and walked up to the entrance. The door opened with a cheerful ding, and for a second, everything seemed normal. The smell of fries and burgers hit me immediately, and the interior looked exactly like you'd expect. Clean booths, plastic chairs, and a counter with a glowing menu board. Except the menu was blank. No Big Macs, no McNuggets, no prices. Just a blank digital screen with a faint, glitchy glow. I walked up to the counter, trying not to feel too freaked out, and that's when I saw the employees. There were 3 of them, all wearing the classic McDonald's uniform. Red polo shirts, black visors, and name tags. But something about them wasn't right. They were too stiff, standing perfectly still behind the counter, their hands resting flat on the surface like they were posing for a picture. And their eyes, they didn't blink. Hi, I said, feeling awkward. Can I, order something? One of them, a woman with a name tag that said Linda, tilted her head just slightly. Her smile didn't move, but her voice came out in this monotone, almost robotic way. Welcome to McDonald's number 19. What can I get for you? I heard about a manager's special? For a moment, none of them moved. Then, all at once, they turned their heads toward the back of the restaurant, like they were waiting for something, or someone. Finally, Linda spoke again. Please wait. The manager will see you shortly. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there. The other 2 employees didn't say a word, didn't even blink. It felt like they were staring right through me. The sound of the fryers and soda machines humming in the background was the only thing keeping me grounded. That's when I heard footsteps behind the counter. Part 4. The kitchen never closes. A man stepped out from the kitchen, wearing a pristine black suit with a red tie. He didn't look like a McDonald's manager, more like a corporate executive. His name tag said, The Manager, and his face was stretched into the kind of smile that felt more threatening than friendly. "Welcome," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "You're here for the manager's special?" I nodded, my throat dry. He gestured for me to follow him, leading me through a side door marked "Employees Only." Normally, I'd never go somewhere like that, but at this point, I felt like I didn't have a choice. The kitchen was massive, way bigger than any McDonald's kitchen I'd ever seen. Stainless steel counters stretched as far as the eye could see, and the air was filled with the smell of grease and something metallic. Every machine was running, but there were no workers, no cooks. Just rows of burgers flipping themselves, fry baskets dipping into oil, and soda dispensers pouring drinks into cups that no one ever picked up. "The kitchen never closes," the manager said, almost like he could read my thoughts. "That's what makes number 19 unique." I was about to ask what he meant, but then I saw it. A tray sitting on the counter with a single burger on it. The bun was too perfect, the patty almost gleaming. And the fries? They were stacked neatly, like each one had been measured and placed by hand. "This is the manager's special," he said, sliding the tray toward me. "Enjoy." I don't know why I took a bite. Maybe it was the way he was staring at me, or the fact that I felt like I couldn't leave without trying it. Either way, as soon as I bit into the burger, I knew something was wrong. The taste was off. Not bad exactly, but wrong. Too salty, too sweet, too rich. It was like every flavor was cranked up to an unnatural level. My mouth felt numb and my head started spinning. I put the burger down, but the manager just smiled. "Most people can't finish it," he said, "but don't worry, it's already done its job." I stumbled out of the kitchen, back into the main dining area, but something had changed. The employees were gone. The lights were dimmer. And when I looked outside, my car wasn't there anymore. I don't remember how I got home. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in my bed, my clothes smelling like grease and something metallic. I checked my phone, but there was no record of the address I'd entered into the GPS. The pictures I'd taken of the McDonald's were gone too. But the worst part? Every night since then, I've heard the faint sound of footsteps in my hallway. Slow, deliberate. And sometimes when I look out my window, I swear I can see the golden arches glowing in the distance. I found a viral TikTok challenge about a haunted Starbucks. The barista knew my order before I spoke, and the receipt had my birth date on it. Let me start by saying I'm not usually the kind of person who falls for TikTok trends. You know the ones, some ridiculous challenge where people do backflips off bridges or eat something weird for clout. But this one? It felt different. It was called the Haunted Starbucks Challenge, and the videos were all over my For You page. The setup was simple. You'd find an address on a sketchy website that supposedly led to a haunted Starbucks. You'd go in, order your usual drink, and something creepy would happen. Some people claimed their cups had cryptic messages on them. Others said they were served by baristas who looked eerily familiar, like identical to them. It sounded dumb, but the videos were convincing. Plus, the comments were full of people saying, "Do not go," or "It's not worth it," which only made me more curious. After an hour of scrolling, I keyed. I followed a link in one of the video descriptions, which led to a plain black web page with the address of the Starbucks and a countdown timer. It said the location was only active between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Perfect. Creepy midnight Starbucks run. What could go wrong? The address wasn't far, just a 40-minute drive. It was in a part of town I'd never been to before, way out in the suburbs. When I pulled up, the place looked normal. Too normal. It had the familiar green sign, the drive-thru, and even a few cars in the parking lot. Inside, the vibe was off. The lighting was dimmer than usual, almost like the fluorescent bulbs were struggling to stay on. There were a couple of customers sitting at tables, but none of them were talking, just staring at their drinks. When I walked up to the counter, the barista was already looking at me. She had this unsettling smile like she'd been waiting for me all night. Her name tag said Emily, but something about her face felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was like her expression didn't quite match the rest of her body. Before I could say anything, she spoke. Grande caramel macchiato, extra drizzle, right? My stomach dropped. That's my usual order, but I hadn't said a word. I tried to play it cool and nodded. She typed it into the register without looking and handed me the receipt. That's when I noticed it. At the bottom of the receipt, where the timestamp should have been, it said, birthday, my exact birth date. I stared at the receipt, trying to make sense of it. There was no way it was a coincidence. My hands were shaking as I shoved it into my pocket, but Emily, if that was even her name, just kept smiling, like she knew something I didn't. When my drink was ready, I grabbed it and sat down at one of the corner tables. The first thing I noticed was the cup. Instead of my name, it said, hello, my full name. Not just my first name, which they usually mess up anyway, my full name. I didn't even take a sip. I just sat there, gripping the cup, wondering if this was some elaborate prank. Maybe TikTok planted fake Starbucks locations for viral content? It sounded ridiculous, but what else could it be? I decided to record a quick video for proof, but when I opened TikTok, the app wouldn't load. None of my apps would. The Wi-Fi in the Starbucks was working, but every time I tried to connect, it directed me to a blank page with the same message. Do not leave. The manager will see you soon. Part 4. The Manager. At this point, I was done. I threw the cup away and headed for the door, but the moment I reached for the handle, Emily called out. Leaving already? She said, her voice oddly flat. I turned around and she was just standing there, smiling. The other customers, who I hadn't even noticed move, were now watching me too. They weren't blinking. None of them. Before I could respond, a man stepped out from the back. He was tall, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, not a Starbucks uniform, and had this unnervingly calm expression. He didn't look at Emily or the other customers. He looked straight at me. You ordered the manager's special, he said, his voice smooth. I didn't, I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand. It's already been prepared. I don't know why, but I followed him back to the counter. He placed a new cup in front of me. The lid was off, and the drink wasn't a caramel macchiato anymore. The liquid inside was pitch black, thick and swirling like it was alive. You'll want to finish this, he said. Most don't. I backed away, shaking my head, but the other customers, no, the other people, stood up and blocked the exit. The manager just smiled and pushed the cup closer to me. I don't remember leaving. One second I was staring at that black liquid, and the next I was waking up in my car, parked outside my apartment. My drink cup was sitting in the cup holder, empty except for a faint black residue. When I checked my phone, the Starbucks receipt was in my photos. The timestamp now said 3:33 a.m., and beneath it was a new line. We'll see you again soon. I deleted the photo immediately, but the receipt showed up again the next day, this time in my email. No sender, no subject, just the same cryptic message. Now every time I drive past a Starbucks, I swear I see Emily inside, smiling at me through the window. The worst part? I've stopped ordering coffee. But every morning I wake up to a fresh caramel macchiato on my kitchen counter, with my name on it. A dark web page claims, Burger King's king mascot is based on a real person. Last night he was standing outside my window. So let me start by saying I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just bored out of my mind, scrolling through Reddit and YouTube like any other night. Somehow, I ended up on this rabbit hole about fast food conspiracies. You've probably heard some of them before, how certain mascots are based on real-life people or how secret menu items are tied to urban legends. One post stood out to me. It was about the Burger King mascot. Yeah, the creepy guy with the frozen smile and the crown. Someone claimed they found a page on the dark web that said he was based on a real person. Not a model or an actor, but a real guy who used to live near Burger King's original headquarters back in the 50s. According to the post, the dude was obsessed with being royalty and would show up to local events dressed in a cape and crown. The kicker? He disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and people started seeing him in their neighborhoods years later, after he was declared dead. I thought it was hilarious, like, come on, a ghost Burger King mascot haunting people? It sounded like a bad creepypasta, but the post included a link to the supposed dark web page. Against my better judgment, I decided to check it out. Getting to the page wasn't easy. I had to download a Tor browser, navigate through a bunch of sketchy forums, and follow a trail of links that felt like a scavenger hunt. When I finally found it, the page was simple, just black text on a white background. At the top, it said, "The King Files. He's not a mascot. He's watching." Below that, there were a bunch of bullet points detailing sightings of the King over the years. People claimed to see him standing outside their houses late at night, usually near a Burger King location. He never moved, never spoke, just stood there, staring. One post described a guy who found a Burger King crown on his doorstep the day after seeing him. Another said they'd heard someone whisper, "Have it your way," through their window at 3 a.m. I was half laughing, half creeped out. But then I scrolled to the bottom of the page where it said, "Enter your address to see if the king has visited your area." It was probably a joke, but my curiosity got the better of me. I typed in my address, hit submit, and waited. The page froze for a second, then refreshed with a single line of text. "Last seen 2 miles from your location." I felt a chill, but I told myself it was just a random response. A creepy gimmick to freak people out. Still, I closed my laptop and double-checked that my doors were locked before I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to something strange on my porch. Sitting right in the middle of the welcome mat was a Burger King crown, the cheap cardboard kind they give to kids. It was pristine, not a wrinkle or smudge on it. At first, I thought maybe one of my friends had seen my Instagram story. I'd posted a screenshot of the dark web page, joking about it. But when I texted a few of them, no one owned up to it. In fact, they all started roasting me for going on the dark web in the first place. I decided to throw the crown away, but as soon as I picked it up, I noticed something written inside. In shaky, almost childlike handwriting, it said, "Long live the king." That's when it stopped being funny. I tossed the crown in the trash and tried to forget about it, but the thought kept nagging at me. If this was a prank, someone had gone out of their way to freak me out. But how would they have known where I lived? That night, I was lying in bed, doom scrolling Twitter, when I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe an animal. But then I heard it again, this faint scraping noise, like something dragging across the pavement. I got up, went to the window, and peeked through the blinds. My stomach dropped. Standing in the middle of my yard was a man dressed exactly like the Burger King mascot. The robe, the crown, the oversized head with that frozen smile, it was all there. He wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still, his head tilted slightly like he was listening. My first thought was to grab my phone, but my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I opened the camera app and took a picture, but the flash went off, lighting up my entire room. The king's head snapped toward me. He didn't move his body, just his head, like a mannequin that had been yanked sideways. I panicked, dropping the phone and backing away from the window. By the time I worked up the courage to look again, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every car that drove by, I thought it was him coming back. In the morning, I found another crown on my porch, but this one was different. The inside was covered in writing, tiny letters that spiraled all the way around. Most of it was nonsense, strings of random words and phrases. But one line stood out. "You invited me, now I'm here." I haven't seen him Avi since, but weird things keep happening. My Burger King app keeps sending me notifications, even though I deleted it. Yesterday, I got a text from an unknown number that just said, "Order up." And last night, I found a Burger King bag sitting on my kitchen counter. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not messing with it anymore. If you see anything about the king online, do yourself a favor. Don't click it. And if you hear someone whisper, "Have it your way," late at night, don't look outside. I rented a Nike-themed Airbnb I found on the dark web. The mirrors reflected someone else wearing my clothes. This all started because I was broke, like barely making rent broke. My friends and I had been planning a weekend trip for months, a little getaway to clear our heads and chill. But when it came time to book the Airbnb, every decent option was either taken or ridiculously overpriced. That's when I stumbled onto something weird. I'd been browsing Airbnb late at night, scrolling through listings with that sinking feeling you get when you know you're out of options. I was about to give up when I remembered something from a Reddit thread I'd read weeks earlier. It was about finding hidden, off-market rentals through the dark web. Most people said it was a bad idea, sketchy hosts, no refunds, all that. But one commenter claimed they'd found an amazing deal on a 5-star beach house for half the price. I figured, why not? I wasn't planning on buying illegal stuff or anything. I just wanted to see if there were any legit rentals. After about an hour of clicking through broken links and forums full of sketchy usernames, I found a listing that stopped me in my tracks. It was titled, Nike Experience Home, Live Like a Legend. The pictures looked incredible. The entire house was Nike-themed. Sleek modern furniture, a mini basketball court, a gym, and even Nike-branded bedsheets. It looked like the kind of place an influencer would rent for a photo shoot. The description said it was available for exclusive bookings, and the price? Dirt cheap. Less than $100 a night for the whole house. Against my better judgment, I clicked Book Now. The house was about an hour outside the city, tucked into a quiet neighborhood that felt just far enough away from civilization to make you nervous. When we pulled up, my friends joked about how fancy it looked. "Dude, are you sure this isn't a scam?" one of them said. I laughed it off, even though the thought had crossed my mind more than once. The host hadn't left any instructions except for a single text that morning. Key is under the mat. Enjoy your stay. The inside was just as impressive as the pictures. Everything was Nike branded. Seriously, everything. The living room had giant posters of old Nike ads, the gym was fully stocked with branded weights, and even the fridge had custom Nike magnets. It was almost too perfect. But the weirdest part? The mirrors. They were everywhere, huge floor-to-ceiling ones in the hallways, smaller ones in the bedrooms, even a mirrored backsplash in the kitchen. It felt like the house was designed to make you look at yourself constantly. At first, we joked about it. "Guess Nike wants us to reflect on our greatness," one of my friends said, but the mirrors started to creep me out. Something about them felt wrong. That first night, we were hyped. We played basketball in the mini court, blasted music in the gym, and even took a bunch of ironic Instagram photos with the mirrors. Everything seemed fine until we started winding down. Around midnight, I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth. As I leaned over the sink, I noticed something in the mirror behind me, a flicker, like someone had walked past. I turned around, but the hallway was empty. I told myself it was just my imagination, but when I looked back at the mirror, I swear I saw a shadow. Not my shadow, something taller, standing perfectly still. I blinked, and it was gone. When I got back to the living room, my friends were sitting on the couch, staring at their phones. One of them looked up and said, "Yo, did you guys hear that?" "Hear what?" I asked. "Like, footsteps upstairs." We all froze. The house was supposed to be empty, and the only locked door we'd found was in the basement. None of us wanted to admit we were scared, so we laughed it off, saying it was probably the pipes or the wind. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The second night was when things got really bad. I woke up around 2 a.m. feeling uneasy, like someone was watching me. The room was pitch black, but the faint glow of the hallway light seeped through the door. I turned toward the mirror on the wall, and that's when I saw it. Someone was standing in the mirror wearing my clothes. It wasn't me. Their posture was off, too rigid, and their face was slightly blurred, like a photo that didn't quite load. They were just standing there, staring at me with this lifeless expression. I bolted out of bed and flicked on the lights, but when I looked back at the mirror, it was empty. I thought I was losing it, but when I went to check on my friends, I found them huddled in the living room, whispering. "We need to leave," one of them said, his face pale. Apparently, he'd seen the same thing, a reflection that wasn't him. Another friend said the mirrors in the gym had started shifting, showing different parts of the house instead of the room they were in. We decided to pack up and leave, but when we opened the front door, it wouldn't budge. The locks weren't stuck. The door just wouldn't move, like it was part of the wall. That's when we heard the footsteps. The sound came from the basement, the one place we hadn't been yet. It was slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth. None of us wanted to go down there, but staying put wasn't an option either. We grabbed a flashlight and made our way down, the creaky stairs echoing with every step. The basement was cold with concrete walls and a single mirror at the far end. This one was different. Larger, older, with a thick, ornate frame that didn't match the modern aesthetic of the house. As we approached, the reflections in the mirror didn't match reality. Instead of showing us, it showed the house, but different. The lights were dimmer, the furniture was older, and the figures in the mirror weren't us. They were versions of us, standing motionless, their faces blank. Suddenly, the mirror cracked and the reflections turned toward us. We ran. I don't know how, but the front door was unlocked when we got back upstairs. We didn't stop running until we were in the car, speeding away from the house. None of us have talked about it since. When I checked the dark web page the next day, it was gone. No listing, no host, nothing. But the worst part? This morning, I found a small mirror in my bedroom. It wasn't mine. And when I looked into it, I swear I saw someone else staring back. I followed a viral hashtag about abandoned amusement parks. The park I found wasn't abandoned, but its guests weren't alive. It started, like most bad ideas, with TikTok. I was scrolling late at night, caught in that endless loop of oddly specific content, when I came across a video about abandoned amusement parks. You've probably seen them, eerie drone shots of decaying roller coasters, overgrown bumper car tracks, and carousels frozen in time. The music was haunting, and the captions dared viewers to explore. The hashtag abandoned amusement parks was trending, and I was hooked. I spent hours watching video after video, each one creepier than the last. Then I saw it, a video of a park I didn't recognize. The uploader didn't say much, just a single line in the caption, "You'll never forget Crescent Moon Park." The video was unsettling. It showed the entrance to a massive, old-fashioned amusement park with a glowing crescent moon sign overhead. The rides looked pristine, not like the rusted relics in other videos, but the weirdest part? There were people in the park. Families riding the Ferris wheel, kids running around, workers manning the booths, but none of them looked alive. Their movements were jerky, and their faces seemed blurry, like the camera couldn't focus on them. The uploader tagged a location, so naturally, I looked it up. Crescent Moon Park wasn't on Google Maps, but when I checked an old forum about urban exploration, someone had posted directions. It was only a couple hours away. That's when I made the first mistake. I decided to go. I left early the next morning, armed with snacks, my phone, and a vague sense of adventure. The drive was uneventful at first, just empty highways and stretches of farmland. But as I got closer, things started to feel wrong. The GPS led me down a narrow dirt road surrounded by dense trees. My phone lost service and the radio started glitching, playing bits of static mixed with faint carnival music. I thought about turning back, but the road opened up to a clearing, and there it was, Crescent Moon Park. The entrance looked exactly like the video. The crescent moon sign was glowing faintly, even though it was broad daylight. The gates were wide open, and the ticket booth looked like it had been abandoned for decades. No cars in the parking lot, no people in sight. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my phone and walked inside. The park was massive, and at first glance it seemed completely abandoned. The air was heavy, like a storm was about to roll in. I passed by a carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, and a cotton candy stand covered in cobwebs. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of a ride swaying in the wind. But the deeper I went, the stranger it got. I started hearing faint laughter, like kids playing in the distance. It was too far away to pinpoint, but it gave me chills. Then I noticed something even weirder. Footprints. Fresh ones, leading toward the roller coaster. The coaster looked like it had just been built. The tracks were shiny, the cars pristine, and the control booth lights were blinking. But there was no one there. At least no one I could see. Then the coaster started moving. I swear, I saw people in the cars as they sped past, their faces frozen in expressions of joy. But when the ride stopped, the cars were empty. By now, I was thoroughly freaked out, but I couldn't leave. I don't know why, I just felt compelled to keep going. I followed the sounds of laughter to the Ferris wheel. It was turning slowly, its lights flickering in the dim light. A family was sitting in one of the gondolas. A man, a woman, and 2 kids. They weren't moving, just sitting there, perfectly still. I waved, trying to get their attention, but they didn't react. As the gondola swung closer, I got a better look at their faces. They weren't blurry like in the TikTok video, they were pale, their eyes wide and glassy, like mannequins brought to life. But their mouths were locked in huge, unnatural smiles. I stumbled back, tripping over a bench. That's when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from behind me. I turned around, and there they were, the workers. They were wearing old-fashioned uniforms, the kind you'd see in a 1950s theme park. Their faces were blank, expressionless, and their movements were stiff, like they were being controlled by invisible strings. One of them was holding a balloon, its surface reflecting the crescent moon sign in the distance. "Welcome to Crescent Moon Park," one of them said. His voice was flat, robotic. "The rides are always open." I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get out. The workers didn't chase me. They just stood there, watching, their heads slowly turning as I fled. I found the entrance gate and sprinted through it, barely noticing that the crescent moon sign was no longer glowing. My car was still there, but the tires were covered in dirt, like it had been sitting there for years. I jumped in, started the engine, and didn't stop driving until I was miles away. When I finally got home, I checked my phone. The video about Crescent Moon Park was gone, and so was the forum post with the directions. It was like the park had erased itself from the internet. But the worst part? When I opened my camera roll, there were pictures I didn't remember taking. Blurry shots of the roller coaster, the Ferris wheel, and the family in the gondola. In the last photo, the workers were standing in a line, staring directly at the camera. Behind them, in the shadows, was a figure I hadn't seen before. It was tall, wearing a top hat and a crescent moon badge on its chest. Its face was empty, except for the smile. I deleted the pictures, but sometimes late at night, I hear carnival music outside my window. And every morning since, there's a faint smell of cotton candy in my apartment. A hacker sent me a live feed from the woods behind my house. It shows someone digging a grave with my name on the headstone. This all started with an email. I wasn't doing anything unusual, just browsing Reddit and watching random YouTube videos when the notification popped up. The subject line was blank and the sender's address looked like random gibberish. Normally, I'd delete something like that without a second thought, but for some reason, I clicked it. The body of the email was just a single sentence. "Check this out." Beneath it was a link. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone click a sketchy link from a random email? I don't have a good answer. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to feel like I was in one of those creepy internet stories. The link took me to a black web page with a single video player in the center. At first, the screen was blank, but after a few seconds, the feed came to life. It was a live video taken at night showing a patch of woods. It didn't hit me right away, but as I watched, my stomach dropped. The woods looked familiar. Too familiar. They were my woods, the ones behind my house. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was some random forest that happened to look like mine. But then the camera panned slightly and I saw something that confirmed it. There, in the distance, was the old shed at the edge of my property. I felt a wave of nausea. Someone was out there, filming my backyard in real time. My first instinct was to grab my phone and call the police, but as I reached for it, the feed changed. A figure stepped into view. They were wearing a black hoodie, the hood pulled up so I couldn't see their face. In their hands was a shovel. They stood there for a moment, as if they knew I was watching, then started digging. At first I thought maybe they were burying something, like stolen goods or evidence of a crime. But then the camera zoomed in, and I saw what they were digging. A grave. The dirt piled up on the sides, forming a shallow pit. And at the head of the grave was a wooden marker. The feed zoomed in even closer, and I saw what was written on it. My name. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. This had to be a prank, right? Maybe one of my friends was messing with me, but how would they know about the woods behind my house? None of them had even been over before. I checked my doors and windows, making sure everything was locked. Then, against my better judgment, I opened the laptop again. The feed was still there, but the figure had stopped digging. They were just standing there, staring into the camera. They tilted their heads slightly like they were trying to look at me through the screen. A new notification popped up. Another email from the same gibberish address. This time the subject line said, "Do you like it?" The body of the email was a single line, "Come see it for yourself." I froze. My mind raced with every worst-case scenario imaginable. Who was this person? How did they know my name? Why were they in my backyard? I grabbed a flashlight and stood by the back door, debating whether I should go outside or just call the cops. Before I could decide, the live feed glitched. For a brief second, the screen went black, then came back. This time, the camera wasn't pointed at the woods anymore. It was pointed at my house. I couldn't breathe. The camera was focused on my back door, the same one I was standing next to. I stared at the screen, half expecting to see myself, but the doorway was empty. Then the camera shifted slightly, panning over to the edge of the house. A shadow moved across the screen. They were closer now. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the flashlight. I tried calling the police, but my phone wouldn't connect. No signal, no Wi-Fi. It was like I'd been cut off from the world. I grabbed a kitchen knife and opened the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't see anyone. The woods were silent, the only sound coming from the leaves crunching under my feet. I shined the flashlight toward the spot where the grave had been, but the ground looked untouched. No dirt piles, no wooden marker. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the whole thing was some elaborate hoax. But as I turned back toward the house, the beam of my flashlight caught something sticking out of the ground near the shed. A wooden marker. I approached it slowly, my heart in my throat. The marker was identical to the one in the video, with my name carved into the surface. Beneath it, the dirt was freshly disturbed. I felt a presence behind me and spun around, but there was nothing there. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and distorted, coming from the direction of the house. "Go inside." I ran back to the house, locking the door behind me. My laptop screen was still on, but the feed was gone. In its place was a message, typed out in bold white text on a black background. "You should have stayed inside." The lights flickered and my laptop shut off. I sat there in the dark, clutching the knife, waiting for something, anything to happen. Hours passed, but nothing did. Eventually, I fell asleep on the couch, too exhausted to stay awake. When I woke up, it was morning. Everything seemed normal. The laptop worked fine, my phone had service again, and the marker in the backyard was gone. For a brief moment, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. But then I checked my emails. There was a new message, this time with an attachment. The subject line said, "Nice try." I opened the attachment and my stomach turned. It was a photo of me taken from inside the house. I was asleep on the couch, the knife still in my hand. And standing in the background, just barely visible in the shadows, was the figure in the hoodie. I haven't been back to the woods since. I've moved to a new place, changed my number, and deleted all my social media. But every night, I check my emails before I go to sleep, dreading the moment I see another blank subject line. Because I know, one day, they'll find me again. I found a box of shoes in the woods near my town. Each pair belonged to someone who went missing. Let me set the scene. I'm not an outdoorsy person. I hate bugs, I hate dirt, and I get winded after a brisk walk. But my best friend Jay is the complete opposite. He's always dragging me on these adventures into the woods, swearing it'll be fun. Last weekend, he convinced me to go hiking on a new trail just outside our town. I said yes because honestly, I needed to get out of the house. Too much time doom-scrolling TikTok had started to mess with my brain. The trail wasn't even marked, just a worn path that Jake claimed led to a secret clearing he'd heard about online. It sounded sketchy, but he swore it was worth it. We spent about an hour walking through thick trees and uneven terrain. The farther we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the crunch of our boots on the dirt. That's when we found it. At first, I thought it was just a random cardboard box someone had dumped in the middle of the woods. It was old and damp, covered in moss, and barely holding together. Being Jake, immediately went to check it out. I told him to leave it alone because who knows what kind of gross stuff is in a box in the middle of nowhere? But he ignored me and ripped the lid off. Inside were shoes. Dozens of them. At first, it didn't seem that weird. People dump stuff in the woods all the time, right? But as we started pulling them out, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. Each pair of shoes was different. Men's boots, women's sneakers, kids' sandals. But they all looked worn. Dirty soles, scuffed toes, laces frayed from use. These weren't old shoes someone was getting rid of. These were shoes that had been taken off people. "What the hell is this?" I asked, feeling uneasy. Jake didn't answer. He was holding up a pair of bright pink Converse that looked way too small for an adult. "Dude, these are kids' shoes," he said quietly. That's when I noticed the writing. Each shoe had a name written inside with a black Sharpie, like someone was labeling them for gym class. Emily, Jason, Maya, name after name scrawled in shaky handwriting. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some weird lost and found collection? A prank? But then Jake froze, his face pale. He held up a muddy pair of black Vans with faded yellow laces. Inside the name read, Jake. We left the box where we found it and hiked back to the car in record time. Neither of us said much, but I could tell Jake was shaken. So was I. Seeing his name on those shoes, it didn't feel like a coincidence. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about the box. I did some Googling and found something that made my blood run cold. Over the past 5 years, there had been multiple disappearances in our area. People of all ages, genders, and backgrounds had gone missing, most of them last seen near wooded areas. None of them had been found. One name stood out, a girl named Emily Harris. She was 14 when she disappeared 2 years ago. Her parents said she'd gone out for a walk in the woods and never came back. The same name was written inside those pink Converse we found. I wanted to believe it was just a creepy coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I texted Jake, telling him what I'd found, but he didn't reply. That wasn't like him. He always responded, even if it was just a dumb meme or a one-word answer. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. The next day, I went to Jake's house. His car was in the driveway, but when I knocked, no one answered. I texted again. "Are you okay? Call me." Hours passed and still nothing. I decided to drive back to the trail. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe to find Jake hanging out in the clearing or something. But when I got there, the box was gone. The spot where it had been was still marked by a patch of disturbed dirt. But the box and all the shoes were missing. As I stood there trying to make sense of it, I heard something behind me. Footsteps. I spun around, heart racing, but no one was there. The woods were silent. Too silent. That's when I saw them. Jake's black Vans with the faded yellow laces sitting neatly on the path. I didn't touch them. I just stared, my pulse pounding in my ears. The shoes were clean now, no mud, no scuffs, like they'd been polished. The name inside was still there, written in the same shaky Sharpie. Jake? I grabbed my phone to take a picture, but the screen glitched out, the camera refusing to focus. A faint buzzing sound filled the air, growing louder, like a swarm of bees. I turned to run, but the buzzing followed me, growing deafening. My vision blurred, and I tripped, landing hard on the dirt. When I looked up, I wasn't alone. A figure stood on the path, holding the box of shoes. I couldn't make out their face. It was obscured, like a shadow was cast over it. They reached into the box and pulled out a pair of shoes. My shoes! The ones I was wearing. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not stopping until I was in my car. I didn't look back. I couldn't. It's been 3 days since then, and Jake still hasn't answered his phone. I went back to his house again, but now his car is gone, and the windows are dark. The police aren't taking me seriously, and I can't exactly tell them about a haunted box of shoes. Last night, I found a pair of shoes on my doorstep. They weren't mine, but the name inside was. Jason. I don't think I'll be able to run this time. I discovered a hidden subway station in my city. The trains run, but the passengers don't breathe. Let me start by saying this wasn't supposed to be some wild adventure. I was just trying to save time on my commute. I live in a city with one of those massive subway systems that's basically a maze. The kind of place where locals and tourists alike get lost daily. It was a Monday morning, and I was running late. My usual route to work was crowded, as always, so I decided to take a shortcut through an older part of the subway. It's the kind of area people avoid. Poorly lit, smells like damp concrete, and half the signs are so faded you can't read them. But I'd heard from a coworker that there was a little-known passage connecting two major stations, shaving off about 10 minutes of walking. Sounded good to me. About 5 minutes into the shortcut, I noticed something strange. The tiled walls started to look different. The white tiles gave way to darker ones, almost black, and the air felt heavier. The noise of the trains and distant chatter faded until all I could hear were my own footsteps. Then I saw it. A rusted metal door, slightly ajar, with a faint green light seeping through the cracks. Above it was a small, barely readable sign. Platform 13. I'd never heard of a Platform 13 before. I know I should have just kept walking. I was already late, and something about that door felt wrong. But my curiosity got the better of me. I pushed it open, and the hinges let out a groan that echoed down a long, empty stairwell. At the bottom was a platform that looked straight out of another era. The tiles were cracked, the air smelled like mildew, and old posters for long-defunct products peeled from the walls. But the strangest part, a train was sitting there. Not one of the modern subway trains with sleek designs and bright interiors. This thing was ancient. Black metal with small round windows and a headlight that flickered like a dying candle. I should have turned around, but as I stood there, the train doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the lighting was dim, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The seats were old-fashioned, upholstered in red velvet, and the air was icy cold. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The doors closed behind me, and the train started moving. I wasn't even sure where it was going. There weren't any signs or maps, just a series of dim, flickering lights outside the windows. At first, I thought I was alone, but then I noticed the passengers. They were sitting perfectly still, scattered throughout the car. Their clothes were outdated, like something out of a history book. Suits with wide lapels, long dresses, and hats that looked 100 years old. Their skin was pale, almost gray, and their eyes were fixed straight ahead. None of them were breathing. I tried to tell myself they were mannequins, props for some kind of weird art installation. But as I walked past one, I saw its head twitch ever so slightly, like it was trying to turn toward me. I sat down at the farthest corner of the car, trying to stay as far away from them as possible. My phone had no signal, and the Wi-Fi was dead. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through old photos, but then the lights flickered and the train came to an abrupt stop. The doors opened, revealing a platform bathed in a sickly green light. None of the passengers moved, but I felt an overwhelming urge to get off. Something was pulling me forward, like gravity had shifted. The moment I stepped onto the platform, the train doors closed behind me, and the train vanished into the darkness. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The platform stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with more of those peeling posters. One of them caught my eye. It showed a smiling couple boarding a train with the words, "One Way to Eternity," in bold letters. Beneath it, in smaller text, was a warning. "Do not disturb the passengers." The air was freezing, and my breath came out in visible puffs. That's when I heard it. A faint, shuffling sound coming from the far end of the platform. I turned my flashlight toward it, and my heart sank. The passengers were there. They weren't sitting anymore. They were standing, their heads tilted at unnatural angles, staring at me. Their movements were jerky, like marionettes controlled by invisible strings. One of them, a tall man in a tattered suit, took a step forward. I backed away, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my flashlight. The passengers moved closer, their hollow eyes fixed on me. I turned and ran, sprinting down the platform without looking back. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I found another stairwell leading up. The steps were narrow and crumbling, and I nearly slipped more than once. When I finally reached the top, I burst through another rusted door and found myself back in the main subway system. The normal noise of the city hit me like a wave. Train announcements, footsteps, distant conversations. It was like waking up from a nightmare, but when I looked back, the door was gone. Just a blank wall where it had been. I went home that night, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Pale, lifeless, and staring. I tried to forget, to convince myself it was some elaborate prank or hallucination, but then I found something in my pocket. A ticket. Old and faded, with the words Platform 13, Admit One printed on it. I haven't taken the subway since. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint sound of a train whistle, even though there are no tracks near my apartment. And last night, when I checked my window, I swear I saw the tall man in the tattered suit standing under the streetlight, watching me. I downloaded a fitness app that promised to track my steps. Now it tracks my every move, and it knows when I'm not alone. Let me start by saying I've never been a fitness junkie. I'm not one of those people who posts their morning run on Instagram or hits the gym at 5 a.m. But a few weeks ago, I decided to get my act together. I was tired of feeling lazy, so I figured I'd start small. Just track my steps every day. You know, set a goal, hit it, and call it progress. I downloaded this app called Stride, which popped up as a sponsored ad while I was scrolling TikTok. The ad was catchy, bright colors, motivational quotes, and this promise of next-level personalized tracking. Best of all, it was free. I mean, sure, there were a ton of fitness apps out there, but something about Stride seemed inviting. The setup was straightforward. It asked for my weight, height, and fitness goals. Then it asked for permissions, GPS, motion tracking, all the usual stuff. I didn't think twice about it. Apps ask for that all the time, right? What caught my attention was this weird feature called dynamic feedback. The app claimed it could adjust its tracking based on your environment. At the time I thought, cool, sounds futuristic. But now, I wish I'd deleted it the moment it asked for my location. The first couple of days were normal. Stride sent me motivational messages like, "You've got this," or "Only 2,000 steps to your goal." I'd glance at the app occasionally to check my stats, but otherwise it didn't seem different from any other fitness tracker. Then the notifications got weird. It started small. On the third night around 11 p.m., I got a pop-up. "Why are you still awake? Rest is essential for fitness." At first I laughed. Creepy, sure, but probably just some algorithm predicting bedtime habits. I brushed it off and went to sleep. But the next day, it sent another notification. "You forgot your water bottle this morning." And here's the thing, I had. I'd left my water bottle on the kitchen counter when I rushed out the door for work. How could the app know that? Maybe it was a lucky guess, but it left me unsettled. That night, I decided to look deeper into the app's permissions. Stride had access to everything. My GPS, motion sensors, even my microphone. I turned off the mic access and kept my phone on silent, just in case. But that didn't stop it. By the end of the week, Stride was sending notifications that felt personal. Like, too personal. On Saturday, I went for a walk downtown. The app buzzed every few minutes with updates about my pace and distance, but halfway through my walk, it sent something that made me stop cold. "Don't turn around, just keep moving." I froze. My first instinct was to look over my shoulder, but something about the message made me hesitate. The street was busy, couples walking hand in hand, a guy playing guitar on the corner, a group of teens laughing over bubble tea. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. When I got home, I checked the app's step tracker. The steps lined up perfectly with my walk. Except for one thing, there was an extra count of steps, about 20 more than I'd taken. It wasn't my phone miscounting. These steps didn't match my pace. They were logged in clusters, like someone had been walking behind me. I didn't use Stride for the next few days. I avoided opening the app and turned off as many permissions as I could. But it didn't matter. The notifications kept coming. Monday night, while I was working late, I got this message. "You're not alone in the house." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. My apartment was dead silent, but I couldn't ignore the overwhelming urge to check every room. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and searched every corner, closets, under the bed, even the bathroom. Nothing. But when I went back to my phone, the app had logged a step count for the time I'd been walking around the apartment. Not mine, someone else's. It was only 5 steps, but they were in my living room. My living room, where I'd been sitting the whole time. I deleted Stride that night, or at least I tried to. The app wouldn't uninstall. Every time I tried, it glitched and my phone restarted. Eventually, I gave up and left it alone, hoping that ignoring it would make it go away. But the next morning, there was a new notification. It wasn't like the others, no motivational quotes or creepy warnings. Just a single line. Stop trying to delete me. My blood ran cold. I didn't touch the app again, but over the next few days, things got worse. My phone started acting up. Random crashes, messages I didn't send, and photos disappearing from my gallery. The final straw came last night. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on my nightstand. I didn't want to look, but the vibration wouldn't stop. When I finally picked it up, the screen was filled with a live feed. It was dark at first, just shadows shifting. Then I realized what I was looking at. My bedroom. The camera was pointed directly at me, but the feed wasn't from my phone. It was from something or someone standing in the corner. The app buzzed one last time. Run. I don't know how I'm writing this now. My phone is still acting up, and I've started noticing strange footsteps outside my apartment at night. If you're reading this and you ever see an app called Stride, don't download it. Because once it starts tracking you, it doesn't stop. A dark web job. Promised $20,000 to spend the night in a Coca-Cola warehouse. The bottles started screaming around midnight. Okay, so before you start judging me, let me explain. I'm not some reckless adrenaline junkie. I'm just broke. Like, barely paying rent broke. So, when I stumbled across this job posting on a sketchy deep web forum, it felt like a sign from the universe, or maybe the devil. The post was simple. Earn $20,000 to monitor inventory overnight in a Coca-Cola warehouse. There were no fancy descriptions or gimmicks. It sounded like one of those sleep study gigs, but with soda. The only catch? The location was in the middle of nowhere, and you had to stay from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. They didn't ask for a resume or references, just a name and a phone number. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? Besides, who turns down 20 grand for one night? I replied to the ad and got a response almost instantly. Accepted. Report to address at 8:45 p.m. Instructions will follow. I should have seen the red flags, but at the time, all I could see was dollar signs. The warehouse was massive, surrounded by a chain-link fence and bathed in flickering floodlights. It looked like the kind of place you'd see in a Netflix true crime documentary. When I pulled up, the parking lot was empty except for a beat-up van with no windows. A man in a black suit was waiting by the gate. No name tag, no company logo, just a clipboard and a cold, blank expression. He handed me a keycard and said, "Stay in the main office. Do not wander the warehouse. Record any anomalies and report them immediately." Anomalies? I asked, but he didn't answer. He just opened the gate and walked back to the van. Inside, the warehouse was freezing. Rows of pallets stacked with Coca-Cola bottles stretched as far as the eye could see. The air smelled like stale sugar, and the hum of industrial refrigerators filled the space with a constant, low buzz. The main office was a small glass-walled room overlooking the warehouse floor. It had a desk, a computer, and a clock that seemed to tick louder than it should. I settled in, determined to get through the night without losing my nerve. At first it was fine, quiet. Too quiet. Around midnight I heard it, a faint clink coming from the far end of the warehouse. At first I thought it was just the sound of bottles shifting on the shelves, but then it happened again. Louder this time. Like something, or someone, was moving through the rows. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk and scanned the floor. Nothing. Just the eerie glow of the overhead lights reflecting off thousands of glass bottles. I told myself it was just the refrigeration system kicking on, or maybe the building settling. But as I sat back down, the computer screen flickered to life. It was running some kind of inventory software, but the numbers were wrong. The system kept marking random pallets as defective. Then, a new line of text appeared at the bottom of the screen. Warning, containment compromised. I had no idea what that meant, but before I could process it, the sound came again. This time, it wasn't a clink. It was a whisper. I tried calling the number from the job posting, but my phone had no signal. Typical. I grabbed the keycard and stepped out of the office, shining the flashlight down the aisles. The whispers grew louder as I walked. Faint, indistinct, but definitely there. That's when I saw it. One of the bottles on a nearby pallet was shaking. Just slightly, but enough to make my stomach drop. I moved closer, and as I did, the bottle suddenly tipped over, shattering on the floor. The whispers stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the other bottles started to shake. Not just one or two, all of them. Thousands of bottles rattling in unison, the sound echoing through the warehouse like a hive of angry bees. And then they started screaming. It wasn't just a random noise. It was human screams. High-pitched, guttural, overlapping voices, each one filled with pure agony. I clamped my hands over my ears and stumbled back toward the office, but the sound only got louder. The glass walls of the office vibrated, and I swear I saw shapes moving in the reflection, figures standing just beyond the rows of pallets. When I finally made it back inside, the computer screen was flashing red. New text appeared. Evacuate immediately. Do not engage. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my stuff and bolted for the door, but the keycard reader wasn't working. The lock buzzed angrily, refusing to open. Behind me, the screams turned into laughter. Low, mocking, and almost aware. I turned around and saw them. Figures, dark and shadowy, standing between the pallets. Their faces were blank, but their heads tilted unnaturally, as if they were studying me. One of them stepped forward, holding a Coca-Cola bottle in its hand. The liquid inside was black, thicker than it should have been, and it bubbled like it was alive. The figure smashed the bottle on the ground, and the black liquid spread across the floor like ink. It moved fast, too fast, pooling toward me as if it had a mind of its own. I slammed the keycard against the reader again, and finally, the door unlocked. I ran to my car and didn't stop until I was miles away. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the warehouse was dark again, like nothing had happened. The next morning, I got a notification on my phone. $20,000 deposited to your account. No sender, no explanation. I wanted to report what I'd seen, but who would believe me? Instead, I checked the job posting again, but it was gone. The forum it was on had been deleted, like it never existed. Now, every time I open a bottle of Coke, I hesitate. I can't forget the sound of those screams or the way the liquid seemed alive. Whatever's happening in that warehouse, it's not normal. And if you ever come across a job that sounds too good to be true, especially on the dark web, just remember my story and stay far, far away. I found an abandoned Apple store. The screens display faces that look like people I've lost. It was one of those nights when you can't sit still. You know the kind, your mind's racing, and you feel like you're crawling out of your own skin. So I grabbed my jacket and went for a walk. My apartment's in a quiet neighborhood, not far from the edge of town, where the streets are empty, and the streetlights are spaced just far enough apart to leave dark patches. I wasn't planning on going far, just enough to clear my head. But as I wandered, I found myself in a part of town I didn't recognize. The buildings were old, their windows boarded up, and there was this faint hum in the air, like a distant generator. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was just another boarded-up storefront, but as I got closer, I realized it was an Apple store. You know the kind, glass walls, clean white interior, the glowing logo? But something was off. The logo wasn't lit, and the glass was foggy, like no one had cleaned it in years. The whole place looked forgotten. The weirdest part? The door was slightly open. Curiosity got the better of me. I mean, who wouldn't be intrigued by an abandoned Apple store in the middle of nowhere? I pushed the door open, and it let out this low creak, echoing through the empty space. Inside it looked like any other Apple store. Rows of tables, spotless floors, and those sleek, minimalist shelves. But everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. like no one had been there in years. The air smelled faintly of metal and something else. Something sweet but rotten. The screens on the devices were all on, glowing faintly. At first, they just displayed the usual Apple logo, but as I walked farther in, they started flickering. One of the screens caught my eye. It was a MacBook, its screen cracked at the corner. It wasn't showing the Apple logo anymore. Instead, there was an image of a face, not just any face, my mom's face. I froze. My mom passed away 5 years ago. The photo on the screen was one I recognized immediately. It was taken at her birthday party when I was 15. She was smiling, holding up a slice of cake. I didn't take that photo, and it wasn't on my phone or computer. I hadn't seen it in years. The air felt heavier, and my stomach twisted. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of deepfake, an algorithm pulling random images from the internet. But when I looked at the next device, a sleek iMac, it was displaying my friend Dylan. Dylan had died in a car accident last year. His face wasn't smiling, though. He looked scared. His eyes were wide and his mouth was slightly open, like he was about to scream. My legs felt like jelly, but I couldn't stop myself from moving to the next device, then the next. Each one showed someone I'd lost, my grandparents, my childhood dog, even a teacher from high school who'd passed away suddenly. Their faces weren't still like photos. They twitched, blinked, and shifted slightly, like they were trying to break through the screens. I needed to get out of there, but as I turned toward the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and the screen was black, except for a single line of text. "Stay. We're here for you." Then my phone screen changed. It was my mom again, but this time she was speaking. Her voice came through the speakers, low and crackly, like a bad recording. "Don't leave, sweetheart. It's okay." My chest tightened. It didn't sound quite right. The cadence was off, the tone too flat, but it was unmistakably her voice. The other devices in the store started playing voices too. Dylan's voice, shaky and desperate. "Why didn't you answer that night?" My dog's bark, distorted and echoing. My teacher's voice, calm and instructive. "You should have stayed after class." The voices overlapped, growing louder and louder until it was deafening. I dropped my phone, and as it hit the floor, the lights in the store flickered. The screens all went dark for a moment, and the voices stopped. Then, one by one, the devices lit up again, showing the same thing. Me. My face staring back at me. But the expression wasn't mine. The face in the screens looked terrified. I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't open. I yanked at it, slammed my shoulder into it, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, the devices started buzzing, their screens flashing images too quickly for me to process. The voices came back, whispering this time, their words overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. Finally, I smashed a chair through the glass wall. The sound of shattering glass was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I climbed through the jagged opening, cutting my arm in the process, but I didn't care. I ran until I couldn't hear the whispers anymore, until the streetlights felt familiar again. When I got home, I checked my phone. The photo of my mom was my new lock screen. I didn't set it and I couldn't change it. Every device I owned, my laptop, my tablet, even my smart TV had been reset to display that same photo of her. I've moved to a new city since then, smashed every piece of tech I owned, and haven't touched anything made by Apple since. But last night, when I passed a random electronics store, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. In the display window, there was an iPad showing a photo. It was me, walking out of the abandoned Apple store, my face pale and my arm bleeding. And just below the photo, in small glowing text, were the words, "Come back, we're waiting." I followed a dark web map to a hidden Disney attraction. The animatronics were moving without power, and one of them called my name. I'll admit it, I've always been a sucker for Disney conspiracy theories. You know the ones. Secret tunnels under the parks, unbuilt attractions, and those weird rumors about cast members seeing things after dark. It's harmless fun, right? Or at least I thought it was. One night, while I was deep diving through Reddit, I found a thread about a hidden Disney attraction called Project Kingdom. Supposedly, it was an experimental ride Disney scrapped decades ago, hidden somewhere on the property and never officially opened. Most people in the thread called it fake, but one comment caught my attention. It had a link to a file labeled Kingdom Map ... unld. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. My antivirus went wild, but curiosity got the better of me, and I downloaded it anyway. What opened was a grainy black and white map of the Magic Kingdom, but it wasn't the version you'd find online or in a brochure. This one had handwritten notes and an area circled in red, labeled K13. I couldn't find any information about K13 online, but the map included GPS coordinates, and they weren't inside the main park. They pointed to a wooded area just beyond the Disney property line. I know it sounds insane, but I had to see it for myself. I drove down to Florida the next weekend. I told myself it was just a quick road trip to check out the parks. Normal, casual Disney fan stuff. But the map kept nagging at me like a challenge I couldn't back down from. The coordinates led me to an overgrown path near one of the employee-only access roads. I parked my car a few miles away and walked in, pretending like I belonged there. It didn't take long to find it. A rusted chain-link gate hidden behind a wall of ivy. A faded sign read, Maintenance Entrance K13. The gate wasn't locked, just held shut with a loose chain. My heart was pounding as I stepped through. The path beyond was lined with old lampposts, their glass cracked and overgrown with moss. The air smelled damp, like rotting leaves, and the silence was unnerving. No birds, no bugs, just my footsteps crunching on the gravel. Eventually, the path opened up to what looked like an abandoned building. The architecture was unmistakably Disney. Whimsical turrets, colorful accents, and that signature fairy tale vibe. But everything was decayed, like the place had been left to rot for decades. The sign above the entrance read, Welcome to the Kingdom. The door was slightly ajar, and when I pushed it open, it let out a long, low creak. Inside, it looked like a typical Disney ride queue. Rope barriers, faded posters, and fake stone walls, painted to look like a medieval castle. But the air was freezing, and the place smelled like mildew and something metallic. As I moved deeper inside, I saw what must have been the ride vehicles. They were small boats, like something out of It's a Small World, sitting in a shallow, empty canal. Dust covered everything, but the boats looked intact, almost pristine compared to the rest of the building. Then I saw the animatronics. They were scattered along the canal, dressed as knights, princesses, and peasants. Their faces were oddly detailed, too detailed almost. One of them, a jester, was frozen mid-laugh, its painted eyes staring directly at me. Another, a queen, had a crown tilted on her head and a mechanical hand raised as if to wave. That's when I noticed the hum. Faint, barely audible, like a generator struggling to start. None of the animatronics should have been working, but I could swear I saw the jester's hand twitch. I told myself I was imagining things. It was an old ride, abandoned for years. Of course, the animatronics were falling apart. But as I turned to leave, the hum grew louder. A flickering light came from the far end of the canal, drawing my attention. I followed it, my footsteps echoing in the empty building. The canal led to a larger room, like the main showpiece of the ride. There was a massive animatronic dragon curled around a fake castle tower. Its eyes were dark, its mouth slightly open, revealing rows of sharp metallic teeth. And then it blinked. I froze, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The dragon's head tilted slightly, its jaws creaking open wider. A low, garbled voice came from somewhere in the room. At first I thought it was part of the ride's old audio track glitching, but then it said my name. Jay. I dropped my flashlight and the beam hit one of the smaller animatronics, a knight. It was moving, slowly, jerkily, like its joints were rusted. Its head turned toward me and its eyes lit up with a faint, unnatural glow. Jake, it said again, its voice crackling like a broken speaker. Stay with us. That was it. I ran. I didn't care about the map, the mystery, or anything else. I just wanted out. As I sprinted back through the queue, the animatronics came to life behind me. I could hear their motors whirring, their voices calling my name over and over. The jester's laugh echoed through the halls, sharp and grating, like nails on a chalkboard. When I reached the entrance, the door slammed shut in front of me. I pulled at it desperately, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, metallic, clanging footsteps, getting closer. In a last-ditch effort, I smashed the nearest window with my flashlight and climbed through, cutting my arm on the jagged glass. I didn't stop running until I was back at my car, panting and bleeding but alive. I don't know how I made it out, but when I checked the gate on my way back, it was chained shut, the sign covered in ivy again, like I'd never been there. The map on my phone was gone, replaced with a blank file. That night, I started getting notifications on my phone. Random pings with no message, no sender, just a location tag, K13. I haven't been back to Florida since, but sometimes, late at night, I hear that faint metallic hum. And last week, I woke up to find a jester's hat sitting on my bedside table. I don't know how it got there, but I have a feeling I'll be hearing from the kingdom again soon. A TikTok account shared footage from the deep woods near my home. The shadows in the video match my silhouette. It started with a random TikTok. I was scrolling through my feed one night, half asleep, when a video caught my attention. The caption read, "Deep Woods Secrets, #creepy, #unexplained." The video was shaky, filmed in the woods at night. The only light came from a flashlight beam bouncing off the trees. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. Just the sound of someone breathing heavily, crunching leaves underfoot. Then the camera panned to a shadow on the ground. At first it looked normal, just the shadow of the person holding the flashlight. But then another shadow appeared next to it, slightly taller and thinner. The second shadow didn't move like a normal person's would. It twitched, lagging behind the first one as if it wasn't entirely synced. I scrolled away thinking it was some viral horror skit. But later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The woods in the video looked familiar. Too familiar. The next day, curiosity got the best of me. I went back to the TikTok, hoping to find more videos. The account name was just a string of random numbers, and there were only 3 posts. All of them showed similar footage of the same woods. Dark, overgrown, and eerily quiet. I checked the comments, but they were mostly people joking about how this is why I stay inside or tagging their friends. No one seemed to know where the videos were filmed, but I did. The more I watched, the more certain I became that these were the woods behind my house. I recognized the split tree near the trail entrance and the old wooden sign warning hikers to stay on the path. The realization sent a chill down my spine. I've lived here for years, and I thought I knew those woods like the back of my hand. But now, I wasn't so sure. That night, I opened TikTok again to show a friend. When I clicked on the account, there was a new video. The latest video was different. This one wasn't shaky or poorly lit. It was clearer, like it had been filmed on a much better camera. It started with the same woods, but this time, the flashlight beam landed on something unusual. A small clearing with a circle of stones in the middle. I'd never seen that before. The camera zoomed in on the circle, and for a second, I thought I saw something move. A shadow darting across the stones. But it wasn't until the camera turned toward the trees that my heart stopped. The flashlight landed on a figure standing just beyond the clearing. They were mostly hidden behind the trees, but their silhouette was unmistakable. Same height, same build, same jacket I'd been wearing the day before. It was me. The figure didn't move, just stood there as the person filming whispered something I couldn't make out. Then the video ended. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound from outside made me jump. Every creak of the floorboards set my heart racing. By morning, I convinced myself it was all just a coincidence. Maybe someone with the same jacket was wandering around the woods. Maybe I was overthinking it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I grabbed a flashlight and headed out to the trail behind my house. I told myself I just needed to prove it wasn't real. Find the clearing, see that it wasn't there, and move on. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves. Just the sound of my own footsteps. After about 10 minutes, I found it. The clearing from the video. The circle of stones was exactly as I'd seen it. And in the middle was something new. A phone. It was old, its screen cracked, but it lit up when I picked it up. The screen displayed a single app, TikTok, and it was logged into the account that had posted the videos. The notification bar showed a draft waiting to be uploaded. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I tapped on it, and the video started playing. It was me standing in the clearing, holding the flashlight. Except I didn't remember filming it. The me in the video looked nervous, glancing over my shoulder like I was being watched. The flashlight beam flickered as I turned to face the camera. Then behind me, a shadow appeared. It wasn't mine. It was taller, thinner, and moved in that same jerky, unnatural way as in the first video. The shadow leaned closer, and the me in the video froze. Slowly, the shadow's arm extended, reaching toward me. Just as it was about to touch my shoulder, the screen glitched, and the video ended. I dropped the phone and bolted. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get out of those woods. When I finally made it back to my house, I locked every door and window, my hands shaking. I opened TikTok to check the account again, but it was gone. No username, no videos, nothing. That night, I kept the lights on, my eyes darting to every corner of the room. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up to my phone buzzing. It was a notification from TikTok. Your draft is ready to post. I opened the app and there it was, the video from the clearing. But this time it wasn't the shadow that scared me. It was the caption, "You can't outrun your own shadow." I deleted the app, but the notifications haven't stopped. And sometimes when I look outside at night, I see a shadow that doesn't move like it should. And it's always watching me. I found an abandoned Nike factory in the woods. The shoes on the assembly line were moving on their own. Alright, so let me start by saying I'm not the kind of person who goes looking for creepy stuff. I'm just your average dude who likes to hike and maybe take the occasional Instagram-worthy picture of sunsets. But what happened to me last week? I can't explain it, and I haven't slept since. It all started because I got lost. I was hiking alone in a patch of woods about an hour from my apartment, one of those hidden gem trails you find in those Reddit threads about cool places to explore. The trail was supposed to loop back to the parking lot, but somewhere along the way I must have taken a wrong turn. I didn't realize how off course I was until the path just disappeared. I thought, no big deal, I'll just backtrack. Except every direction I turned looked exactly the same. Trees, bushes, dirt, like some copy-paste nightmare. My phone had barely 1 bar of service, and Google Maps was useless. To make matters worse, the sun was starting to set. I was seconds away from full-on panic mode when I saw it. At first I thought it was just a massive rock sticking out of the ground, but as I got closer, I realized it was a building. A factory, to be exact. The side facing me was covered in graffiti, with vines crawling up the walls like Mother Nature had been trying to bury it. Above the broken doors, a faded sign read, Nike. I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would a Nike factory be in the middle of nowhere? Same. But there it was, standing tall like a monument to bad corporate decisions. It looked abandoned, but curiosity got the better of me. I figured if nothing else, it'd be cool to take a few pictures and maybe find a map or something inside. Spoiler, I wish I'd just kept walking. The doors were half open, hanging on rusted hinges that squealed when I pushed them. The inside was even creepier than the outside. It was huge, with conveyor belts stretching across the room, and machinery that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The air smelled stale, like mold and dust, but there was something else. Something faintly chemical, like old rubber or glue. The factory floor was covered in debris, broken glass, chunks of plaster, and what looked like shoes. Hundreds of them. Some were new-looking, others were so old they were falling apart. It was like someone had dumped all their rejects here and just walked away. I took a few pictures for my Instagram story, captioning one with, "Lost in the woods, found an abandoned Nike outlet, LOL." I know, dumb move, but in the moment I thought it was funny. Then I saw the assembly line. It ran straight through the center of the factory, with robotic arms and metal trays that were surprisingly clean. Too clean. As I got closer, I realized the conveyor belt was moving. It wasn't running fast, just a slow, steady crawl, like someone had left it on low power. And on the belt, perfectly lined up, were sneakers. Brand new Nike shoes. They weren't dusty or old like the others on the floor. These looked fresh out of the box, pristine white with the kind of fluorescent soles that practically glow in the dark. I figured maybe the power had somehow stayed on, like some freak electrical anomaly. But that didn't explain the shoes. Who was putting them there? Why were they so perfect? I couldn't stop staring at them. Every time a shoe reached the end of the belt, the robotic arm would pick it up, inspect it, and set it aside on a neat little pile. It was like the factory was still running, except no one was there. I decided to grab a pair, mostly to prove to myself that this wasn't some elaborate hallucination. They were lightweight and cold to the touch, like they'd been in a freezer. But the second I picked them up, the conveyor belt stopped. Dead silence. The air felt thicker, like the factory was holding its breath. I set the shoes down and stepped back, trying to convince myself I hadn't just triggered some horror movie trap. That's when the belt started again, this time faster. The shoes on the line weren't just being inspected anymore, they were moving. The laces twisted like tiny snakes, threading themselves through the eyelets in jerky, unnatural motions. One by one, the shoes started tying themselves into perfect bows, and then they started walking. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. They walked. Not like they were being pushed by some hidden mechanism. These things were moving like they had a purpose. They stepped off the belt and landed on the floor with a soft thud. One pair, then another, then another. I was frozen in place, my brain screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The shoes lined up in front of me like they were waiting for something. Then, without warning, they bolted toward me. I didn't stick around to see what would happen next. I ran, dodging piles of debris and nearly tripping over my own feet. The sound of sneakers slapping against concrete echoed behind me, getting louder with every step. It wasn't just the shoes from the belt anymore. Every pair on the floor was up and moving, like some twisted army of Nike zombies. I made it to a stairwell at the far end of the factory and slammed the door shut behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I could hear the shoes outside, scratching and scuffling against the metal door like they were trying to figure out how to get in. The stairwell led to an office on the second floor. It was small, with a desk and a bunch of old filing cabinets. I locked the door and searched the room, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what was happening. That's when I found the folder. It was lying open on the desk, filled with yellowed papers and blurry photographs. Most of it looked like technical specs, but one page caught my eye. It was a list of names, each one crossed out except for the last. Next to the final name, someone had written, "Subject responded. Await retrieval." Underneath was a picture of a shoe, the exact same shoe I had picked up. I didn't have time to process what I'd just seen. The scratching at the door stopped, and for a moment, everything was eerily quiet. Then the window shattered. A single sneaker flew into the room, landing inches from my foot. It started twitching, trying to right itself like an overturned insect. I grabbed the folder and bolted for the stairs. The shoes were everywhere now, skittering across the floor and climbing the walls like they had minds of their own. I don't know how I made it out, but somehow I did. I ran until I hit a road, flagged down a truck driver, and begged him to take me back to town. I didn't tell him about the factory. What could I even say? Help? I was chased by evil Nikes? He would have laughed me out of the truck. When I got home, I tried to look up the factory, but there's nothing about it online. No old news articles, no records, nothing. It's like it never existed. The folder is still sitting on my desk, but I haven't opened it again. I'm too scared of what I might find. And last night, when I was lying in bed, I swear I heard footsteps outside my window. Not heavy ones, just soft, rhythmic taps. Like someone, or something, was walking in circles. Waiting. I bought a limited edition Coca-Cola from a dark web auction. The bottle started filling itself with blood. Alright, so let me preface this by saying I'm not proud of my curiosity. It's one of those things you think is harmless, until it isn't. I've always been into weird, obscure stuff. You know, like limited edition collectibles, bootleg VHS tapes, or rare items that only pop culture nerds like me care about. I'm also the guy who scrolls through eBay looking for vintage McDonald's Happy Meal toys at 2 a.m. But a couple of weeks ago, I got bored. Like, stupid bored. And for some reason, I started thinking about the deep web. I had never actually gone on it. Always thought it was just a place for hackers, hitmen, and people who want to buy kidneys or something. but I'd seen YouTube videos of people buying mystery boxes from there. I figured, how bad could it be? Spoiler alert, really bad. So after watching like 5 videos in a row, I decided to download a Tor browser. Dumb, I know, but it felt like a harmless way to kill time. At first, it was just boring. I stumbled onto forums with broken links and creepy stock photos and a bunch of places that promised untraceable services. Then I found a site that claimed to specialize in rare and discontinued items. Old toys, autographed memorabilia, weird stuff like that. I was hooked. That's where I found it. The listing just said, 1980s limited edition Coca-Cola bottle, sealed. And there was this grainy picture of an old-school glass Coke bottle with a red and gold label I'd never seen before. The description said it was part of a promotional giveaway from 1983. Only 200 made, it claimed. The current bid was $150, and I thought, okay, that's steep, but this is niche collector stuff. It checks out. The thing that should have tipped me off was the seller's username, REDDRINK. No joke. I laughed it off, thinking it was just a cringy alias. I placed a bid for $200 just to see what would happen. I didn't expect to win, but about an hour later, I got an email saying the bottle was mine. It arrived 2 days later, delivered by some sketchy courier service I'd never heard of. The box wasn't even taped shut, just folded like someone didn't care if it fell open. Inside was the Coke bottle, wrapped in crumpled newspaper from 1995. I should have known something was off then, but I was too excited. It looked authentic, right down to the tiny bubbles trapped in the glass. I posted a picture of it on Instagram, tagging it with number Coca-Cola collectors. That's when things got weird. I swear the bottle was normal when I first got it. The Coke inside was dark, fizzy, and looked exactly how you'd expect an old, unopened soda to look. But the night after I posted it online, I noticed that something was wrong. I had left the bottle on my desk right next to my laptop. Around midnight, I got up to grab a snack, and when I came back, I noticed a faint, sticky trail leading from the bottle. I thought, great, it's leaking. But when I picked it up, the liquid wasn't brown like Coke. It was red, dark, thick, and clinging to the inside of the glass. I unscrewed the cap, thinking maybe it was rust or something, but as soon as I broke the seal, the smell hit me. Coppery, metallic, blood. I gagged and immediately closed it back up, but the damage was done. My heart was pounding. I Googled, why does Coke look like blood? Trying to rationalize it. Maybe the sugar had caramelized over time? Maybe it was a chemical reaction. None of the explanations made sense. I wiped the bottle down and tried to forget about it, but the next morning, the bottle was half full of blood. And it wasn't leaking anymore. The trail I had cleaned up the night before was gone, like it had never been there. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about the bottle. I took more pictures of it, trying to document what was happening. When I zoomed in, I swear I could see things floating in the liquid, like tiny black specks, almost like ashes. I decided to post an update on Instagram, joking about how the Coca-Cola gods are angry. Within minutes, I got a DM from someone I didn't recognize. Their username was just a random string of letters and numbers, and their profile picture was blank. The message said, "Put it back." I replied, "What are you talking about?" They typed back almost instantly, "Put the bottle back where you got it, or you'll regret it." I was freaked out, but I figured it was just some internet troll. I blocked the account and moved on, but over the next few hours, more messages started pouring in. Some were from accounts with no posts or followers, and others were from people I didn't even know. One of them said, "You shouldn't have opened it," and another just said, "Run." At this point, I was ready to throw the bottle out, but when I grabbed it, it felt warm, like it was alive. I dropped it on my desk and stared at it, half expecting it to shatter or spill, but nothing happened. The next day, I went to Starbucks to clear my head. I left the bottle at home because I needed a break from whatever was going on. While I was sitting there, scrolling through TikTok, someone slid into the seat across from me. I looked up expecting to see a friend, but it was a man I didn't recognize. He was pale with deep-set eyes and a creepy, too-wide smile. He was wearing a black hoodie that looked brand new, like he had just pulled the tags off that morning. "You have something that doesn't belong to you," he said. I froze. I think you've got the wrong person. He leaned forward, his smile never fading. The bottle. Give it back. I didn't know how to respond. My first thought was that he had hacked my Instagram or something, but there was no way he could have known I'd be at that Starbucks. Before I could say anything, he stood up and walked out, disappearing into the crowd. When I went home later, the bottle was sitting in the middle of my bed. I tried to get rid of it, I swear. I threw it in the dumpster behind my building, but the next morning, it was back on my desk. I left it on a bus and watched it drive away, but by the time I got home, it was waiting for me at my front door. Then the nightmare started. I dreamed of blood pouring out of the bottle, filling my apartment until I drowned. In another dream, the man from Starbucks was standing over me, holding the bottle and whispering something I couldn't understand. Every night, it got worse. Yesterday, I got another DM, but this time it wasn't a warning. It just said, "It's too late." I don't know what's going to happen, but the bottle's almost full now. The blood keeps rising, and I'm scared of what will happen when it overflows. If anyone knows what's going on, please help. I think I've made a huge mistake.